we're going to talk about how to go ahead and add options, add different controls to the customizer, and how to add a new pane into the customizer. Now there is a separate video I've made which is under the playlist of WordPress functions. You can check it out, how to make this in detail, but in this video we're just going to go through, not in depth, but to run through it. And if you want to go into detail, you can look at that function into my playlist of videos, which is WordPress function. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a directory called customizer inside the directory admin. So inside admin we will create a directory called customizer customizer. And as we've already discussed earlier, that inside of the functions.php at the bottom, we are using this for each loop to ensure that all of the files inside of the admin folder, admin directory, will be included, so we don't have to worry about including these files separately. Okay, so let's close all of the other files. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is create two JavaScript files inside the admin customizer JS. Okay, which is one file is customizer live preview.js and second file is customizer control.js. So let's do that. So inside of this we need to make a JS folder, and inside of the JS folder we need to make the file which is customizer live preview.js. It's a JavaScript file, and we have to make one more file which is customizer control.js. Okay. Sorry, I made a PHP file. Okay, cool. So customizer live preview.js is to deal with the preview. So whenever you go ahead and make any changes over here, for example, site title, whenever you make any changes, you can see that this changes is viewable on the right hand side. So we're getting a live preview, but actually the page is being refreshed whenever we are seeing the changes over here. In order for us to ensure that the page doesn't get refreshed and we get the live preview without even the page being refreshed, we're going to use the JavaScript files, and we're going to use JavaScript to go ahead and make changes, whatever changes we make, to go ahead and render those changes over here without the page refresh. Okay, so customizer-live-preview.js file deals with the preview part, and the other file, which is customizer control.js, handles the controls inside the customizer panel, so these controls. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is inside of the control.js file we're going to add these codes. Okay, so it contains the custom script for customizer controls pane. All right, so you can copy paste this code, and then for the next file which is customizer live preview.js, this handles the live preview ajax calls. This file is for customized preview. This file is cached by WordPress customizer, so either change the version number dynamically to prevent caching or hard refresh each time to make changes. So without the refresh, this will go ahead and make changes to whatever you do over here. So whatever changes you make will be reflecting over here without the page refresh. Okay, so you can see that this is the self-executing function, and we've passed jQuery $sign as jQuery, which will be available here. We are using WP customize function. We have passed blog name, and then we are using a function and then we are saying value.bind and function, and we are selecting site title class and then the a element, and then we're using .text method too, so whatever changes are made are going to be reflected on the live preview without the page refresh. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is create a file called admin.php, and we need to do that inside of this admin folder. I'm just going to go ahead and paste this code inside of that. So you can see that this Cornova. So you can see that we are defining different constants. This is going to return the path up until admin folder. This constant is going to return the path up until the Cornova admin directory. Okay, and then this will be the URI path basically. Okay, and this will be the path to the customizer. Okay, and this will be the URI path, and this will be the file path up until the customizer directory, and this will be path. One moment. Okay, so this is going to give us the path URI up until the JS folder. This is going to give us the path up until the the file path up until the CSS folder. Okay, so I think we haven't really created a CSS folder yet, but let's just comment this out. We don't need that at this moment, and then let's comment this out as well. We don't need this. Okay, and let's see. Okay, so these are different constants basically to make us reach till customizer functions.php, which we're going to create just in a moment. And this is till the class customizer init.php, which we will create in a moment. Okay, and then this for each function again is going to ensure that it includes all the files inside of it. Okay, so that's what is going on inside of the admin.php. Basically declare the constants so that we don't have to keep writing these functions in order for us to access the directory URI or the file path. And then the next thing what we need to do is create another file which is customizer settings.php. So we need to create this file inside of customizer. Customizer settings.php. Okay, I'm gonna paste this code. So I'll explain to you what's going on over here. So this is basically these set of functions are actually coming from the WP Customizer class. Okay, so WP Customizer class provides us with this object. This object is instantiated out of the WP Customizer class, and we're accessing the methods of the WP Customizer class using this object, which is add setting, add control, and so on and so forth. And the add control function basically adds the controls like these in the customizer section, and add setting basically goes ahead and yeah, the add setting function basically goes ahead and insert the data, whatever the user enters over here, whatever the user selects over here into the database, so it can be retrieved later to display it on the front end. Okay, so I will explain to you in a bit as to what's going on over here, but what we really need to do is, if you want to go ahead and create customizer settings, we need to use the customize register hook. Okay, so I'll just show that to you in a moment. So the next thing what we need to do is create a function called customizer functions.php. Create a customizer function .php file. inside of the customizer. So let's do that. Customizer functions. Okay. I'm going to save that. Okay, I'll explain to you in a bit what these functions do, but don't want to confuse you at the beginning. So let's just first create all the files that we need. So this file was customizer-functions.php. That's what we have. The next file we need to create is class customizer init.php, which is inside of the customizer. So it's class customizer init.php. And let's paste the codes as well. Okay. And then there's one more file over here, which is class customizer front.php. Class customizer front.php. We'll paste these codes over here. So this file I can explain to you first that this file basically we have defined a class, okay, and use a construct, we define a construct function, okay, and we've used a do action. We define a do action hook. So in case if any another developer who develops a child theme or a plugin, if they want to hook in their custom function over here at this point, they can do that. Okay, so let's close this one. Okay, so I think now I can go ahead and explain to you what's going on. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go inside the class.customizer init.php. Okay. So if we look at Codex, it talks about how to actually register controls, add settings and sections in customizer is basically using the customize register hook. What we need to do is we need to call an add action function and hook our custom function with the customize register hook. Okay, and go ahead and define all of our settings and controls and all of those functions inside of this custom function. And what happens is the moment you go ahead and define this add action function, uh, when the script reaches customize register hook, when this function is called, automatically the WP customizer class is instantiated and the WP customize object becomes available. So this object is created by the instantiation of the WP customizer class, and because of that, all the methods and properties of the WP customizer class becomes available in this object, and we can access all of these functions which I had just shown you a while back, which were the add setting, add control, add panel, add section, things like that. And this is the object that becomes available inside of a custom function. So what I've done, I could have just went ahead and called this function and defined all of these setting functions and control functions inside of the custom function, but I've taken a different approach, which is also being explained at the bottom on the codex, that why don't you go ahead and create a class, you customize a class, and inside of that you can define these functions as well. So that's the approach I followed. As if you go on to the customizer, class customizer -init.php, you can see that I'm checking if this particular class doesn't exist, then I'm defining my custom class name Cornova customizer, and then I'm going ahead and defining this construct function, which will automatically be called the moment this class is instantiated. So at the bottom, I'm instantiating this class, which will automatically call this function, and this function will automatically call the add action customize register hook, and that's what is supposed to be done. If you check add action customize register, but the only difference is that whenever you want to put the name of your custom function inside the class, whenever you are calling a function inside the class, then it goes this way. So you have to put that in an array. The first parameter will be this, which is the name of the class, and the second parameter will be the name of the custom function inside of which you're going to define all the settings. Okay, so over here I'm calling this function which will automatically be called the moment the class is instantiated, and this is going to call the register function of this class. So register function, if you come down, you can see that what this is doing is basically including this particular file, which means because this is including the customizer settings.php, all of the codes that are written over here will automatically be included at this point. And this is our custom function, inside of which I'm calling all of these control, setting, and panel, and section, all of those functions. And that's what it talks about. Go ahead and call this hook using add action, and then create a custom function inside of which you add all the sections, settings, and controls. And that's what's happening over here. This add action is latching onto this hook, which is going to call our custom function, and custom function will have all the functions that we have defined over here will be included at this point. Okay, and then these functions will be called. Now I can explain to you in detail as to what's going on. Okay, so right, so if you go into the add setting function, let's search that. Add setting. Okay, so you can see that it accepts different parameters. First is the ID, and second is the argument. ID is the unique slug ID for the theme setting, and then you have the argument, which is an associative array, which you can pass different things over here. So what I really want to do over here is I've divided them in different parts, like side title and tagline, then sidebar positions, then footer copyright text, and so on and so forth. So this section, this entire part, what I really want to do is if you go to customizer, site identity, you can see this part, hide tagline. This is created by these bit of code, which is AdControl function of the WP customizer class. So if you go to the codex, you can see that you can either call this function in this fashion, or you can also call it in this fashion. Okay, wherein you can go ahead and pass the first parameter. Yeah, you can actually pass the object of the WP customizer control class. Okay, and so when you use new WP customize control, it's going to instantiate this class and make the object of the class available as a parameter of this in this function. So this add control function, you have different parameters like WP customize, then you have the ID corner height tagline, and you are passing the array. One is the label, which is label is height tagline, so that's the label height tagline. Okay, and then the next is the section is title tagline. So if we go over here, I'll just show that to you. Sorry, I think we're looking at the add setting but not add control. We need to look at add control. So we look at codex for the add control. This displays new controller in the theme customization admin screen. Okay, and then you have different options that you can pass. So this is the example that we can take. Okay, so label we have already discussed, and then section is your section ID. The section is the section ID basically. So if we look at that section, Any readily available for using defined sections. Some available sections are themes, title, tagline, colors, header, image, etc. So depending on what section you define, so there could be two things. First, either you want to add some of the controls in the existing panel. So these are panels that you can see, right? These are panels. Okay, and then inside of the panels you have different sections, and inside of the section you have different controls. So that's the meaning of that. Okay, so you have panels, you have sections, and you have control. So if you want to add some controls inside of the existing panels, then you need to know the section ID of that. Okay, so we have some predefined available. So if you want to go ahead and, let's say, add something to the site identity panel, then you need to use the title tagline, and that's what we have done over here. We have used the title tagline. And if you want to add something to the colors panel, so at the moment we don't have the color panel, but when we do, then we can add that. All right, and then let's say to header image. So again, we don't have header image, but when we do, then you can add that. Then the background image, let's see if we have that. No, we don't. Okay, no problem. So basically these are the names that you can use to define that. And you have static front page, so then I think over here somewhere you can define that. Okay, so you can select that. So for now we are interested in the site identity, hence we have used the title tagline as our section ID. And then the setting. So setting is basically let's see. So your setting ID, you need to give it a unique ID. So I've used this ID as Cornova height tagline, and that's the ID I'm going to use in the ad setting also, so that you can recognize that we're talking about the same ID. Okay. And the type is equal to checkbox. So if you look at the codex, inside of the type, you can see you have options like text, checkbox, radio, select, text area, drop down pages, and things like that. So you can select, so for example, I wanted a checkbox, so I use the checkbox keyword to get that type. Okay. So this function is basically responsible for creating this option. If I go ahead and comment this out, you will notice that it's gone. The height tagline is gone, right? So AdControl is going to add controls in the backend in this section, site identity section, because we have defined the title tagline in the section ID as a section ID. Okay, and then there's add setting function which accepts two parameters, which we had checked earlier also, I think. Add setting. Yeah, so it accepts two parameters. One is the ID, and then you need to use the same ID that you have used in the setting ID. It's the same ID, core number, height, tagline. It's our unique ID. Okay, and then the second is the argument, set of arguments in an array form, which is required. Okay, and then you have different things that you can pass. So first thing is the default value. So we've kept default value as a 0. Okay, capability we are using as edit theme option. So you can see that optional default is edit theme options. And then sanitize callback. So this is important so that the data that comes from the user, we would never trust that, so that we are defining a custom function for sanitizing the data before it is entered into the database, right? Because as you already know that this function basically insert this data into the database, so it is important that we sanitize it before we actually put it into the database. Okay, so this sanitize function we have defined in the customizer functions.php. So we can see Cornova sanitize checkboxes. Here's the function, right? So we've defined this function, and this goes ahead and checks, sanitizes it before it goes ahead and inserts in the database. And if you want to really know where is this thing inserted, you can go onto your database, and it will be under WP options table. What you really need to look for is I think it's theme mods, and I think it's the name slug of your theme, Cornova. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so you can see that this is where it is stored. Okay, so if you double click, you need to look for the, I think the ID, just Cornova hide tagline, and let's see if we have that. Yep, this is the one. I don't know if you can see that in the video. It's too small. I can't really. Okay, I can increase the font. Brilliant. So you can see Cornova hide tagline, and right now it's showing as 1. We had set the default to 0, but because I have checked it over here, I had checked it, that's why it's showing as 1. So if I uncheck it, publish it, now if I go over here, refresh it, and now if I check it, you can see that it's set back to 0. Why? Because we had given the default value as 0. Okay, so now you understand these two functions role. Okay, so AdControl is going to add controls over here, and add setting is basically going to go ahead and insert the value that the user has selected over here, whether checked or unchecked. So for checked, its value is 1, and for unchecked, it's default 0. Okay, so that's basically responsible for showing that in the back end, but we need to show that in front end as well, right? Okay, so I'm going to show that to you how to do that. Okay, so if you go to custom functions.php includes, remember that we discussed about this at the beginning of a tutorial, that I'm going to explain this, what this hide tagline and description class does, and this is the time I need to explain that to you. So inside of our index.php, we are calling this function, not index.php, actually inside of the content.php, I think. Let me check. Yeah, it's actually in the header, not of this pages. So go to header.php. Okay, you can see that in the header.php, in the header section, we are calling this custom function Cornova site branding, and inside of that we are displaying the site title and the site description, right? So over here we are defining this variable hide tagline, and we are using this function get theme mod. So set theme mod sets the theme mod, and get theme mod retrieves the value from the database. So we are using the same ID that we had used over there, which is Cornova hide tagline. So you can see this is the same ID. So what this is going to do is so this function is going to return the value from the database. So we had the value set to 1 or 0. Okay, so it's going to return the value. Let's say if the user has checked the box over here and the value was 1, okay, then this will have a value as 1. Okay, then we are defining another variable called description class, and this is going to go ahead and check if there is a value is 1 or 0. If it's 0, then it's going to be false. If it's 1, then description class will be equal to screen reader text. Okay, so over here we are going ahead and yeah, at this point we are going ahead and saying that's site description escape attribute description class. So this is gonna display the value of the description class, which will be equal to screen reader text in case if the user has checked the box of hide tagline, and then this is going to display the class screen reader text. And what we've done is, if you go to style.css, in style.css, what we really need to do is just one moment. So we need to define this class, and we're going to put that position absolute hide 1 pixel with 1 pixel overflow hidden. So what this is going to do is this is going to add this class is going to go ahead and hide the tagline. Okay, so now if you go ahead and refresh the page, and check this box. Okay, one moment. Right, so if you notice, now if I go ahead and click this tagline is gone, right? And I'll show that to you. So if you see that to this site title which was there earlier, this screen reader text class has been added, and because we have defined height and width as 1 pixel, it will not be shown. Okay, so that's what we need to do. That's how we need to go ahead and take care of it in the front end. Okay, so in the front end, what we're doing is in our custom function, we are adding this class screen reader text in case if we are getting the get theme mod value of this ID as 1, which means if the user has selected the height tagline, we're going to get this data from the database as 1, and that's when it'll be true, and then we'll get this class name, and that will be applied to the site description, and then we have gone ahead and hidden it using our CSS. So that's how it is taken care on the front end. Okay. So I know this video is getting too long, but it's important that we understand this, and so let's continue without wasting time. Okay, great. So you've understood this part, how to go ahead and add the controls to the existing panes on the customizer, and how to display them on the front end. Now we're going to talk about the next section, which will be the general. So how to add a entirely new panel, like for example this general panel that I've added, which was not there earlier. How to add an entirely new panel and create new sections and new controls inside of it. So there's a WordPress function called AddPanel. Okay, and this function again accepts two parameters. First is the ID, unique ID, and second is the array of arguments. So if you check on Codex, let's go and check that. Add panel function. Okay, so you can see that it's an optional, but it accepts the array of arguments. So if we check, we set the priority of 10. The reason why we're setting the priority of 10 is because I'll just show that to you. If you go to Codex under the themes, theme handbook, developer handbook, under the customize API, customize objects, you'll see that each of these panels that you see over here, like site identity, widgets, menus, home page setting, all of these have got different priorities. So depending on where you want this to be displayed, your own panel, your custom panel to be displayed, you need to set the priority. So since I have set the priority to 10, right, this priority is lower than all the other panels, okay, which is why it is going to come above the site tagline, right? And you can see that is above the site identity. Okay, so next is capability. So again, under capability, the default is edit theme options, and that's what we mentioned over here. Then theme supports, we've kept it blank. Title is basically general, and then slug because we're using escape HTML double underscore, and that's the name that's being displayed over here, the title general. So this is responsible for, this function is responsible for adding a new panel over here with this name and with this priority. Okay, next, what we really need to do now, inside of this panel, we want to create two sections: sidebar position and copyright text. So I've divided this into two sections. One is sidebar position and second is footer copyright text. So let's discuss them one by one. So I want to add some controls inside of it. So inside of this, first I want to create the control. So to create a control, I'm going to use the AdControl function, which is going to accept this object of the class WP customized control. This is the ID, unique ID, setting ID basically, which will be the same ID when we are going ahead and using add setting. Then this is the array of arguments. So label is equal to sidebar position, which is this name. Then you have the section, which is Cornova sidebar position section, which is the same name that we're going to use in the add section. Okay, and then you have the setting ID, which is Cornova sidebar position. Remember that earlier we used the setting as Cornova height tagline because we wanted to include our controls inside of the existing panel, but this time we want to include in this panel that we have created, and the ID of this panel, the setting ID of this panel is Cornova general panel, and hence the setting ID of this is Cornova sidebar position. Okay, so that's why we have chosen this, right? and right, and then type is equal to radio. We have discussed this before, right? Depending on what type you want, text or radio or checkbox. So earlier we used checkbox, this time we're going to use radio, and that's why you will see that you have the radio buttons over here. Then we have the choices, so we have set left, right, no sidebar, left, right, no sidebar, and that's what we have here. And then we have the slug name. Okay, and then so this is going to create the control. This is not going to add that into this section. So to add that, we're going to use the add section function. Okay, so add section function again accepts two parameters. One is the ID, which is this ID, which is the same ID that we have passed here in the section parameter. Okay, and then we're going to pass the array of arguments, the title, which is sidebar position, which is this. And then we have the capability edit theme options. We have already discussed this same capability. Okay, and then the description, we've not put that anything in the description. And panel will be the same ID that we have passed while creating the panel, general panel. Okay, so this will ensure that this section will be added to the general panel. Okay. So these three functions are responsible for creating this section right here. So this function creates a control. This function adds these controls inside of the sidebar position section, and then add setting function, as we all know, we've discussed that earlier, is going to go ahead and insert this data into the database. So whatever the user selects. So default, we've kept it to right, and which is why you will see that right is selected by default. And then capabilities edit theme option, which is the same capability for all. And then the sanitize callback is to ensure that this data is sanitized. And this function we have defined into our customizer functions. Cornova sanitize choices, all right? And this is going to return the sanitized data. And then if you want to check the database, you can check Cornova sidebar position. Right now is showing as right. The moment I go ahead and change that to left and publish that, you will notice that let's go ahead and refresh the page. And now if we check, you can see that Cornova sidebar position ID value is equal to left because we have selected left over here. Okay, so these three functions are basically responsible for adding these, creating the control, adding these controls in this section, and inserting that database data, whatever user selected, into the database. But this will not be going ahead and displaying that on the front end. In order for us to display that on the front end, I'll just show that to you what you need to do. So there are two functions that we have designed inside of our custom functions.php, which is inside of our includes folder, which I have been talking about earlier, but I have not explained that to you in detail, is because I was waiting for this moment where I can show that to you what's going on inside of it. So you can see that it adds foundation classes to the primary section of all templates. So this function basically, we have got a variable called sidebar position, and we are going to use the get theme mod to get the position of the sidebar using the same ID that we Cornova sidebar position, which is the same ID that we have defined over here, Cornova sidebar position. Okay, so this is going to get us the value from the database, which is left in this case. Okay, and once we have that value, then we're going to use the foundation class variable. We create this variable. We're going to check if the override foundation class is true. If it is true, then it'll be equal to override foundation classes. And if it is false, then it'll be equal to the large 8, medium 8, small 12, and all of that. So this is going to ensure it will be equal to the foundation classes, and which will ensure that the sidebar will be displayed accordingly. And then if the sidebar position is left, the value that is retrieved from the database, which is this value, if it is left, then the foundation class is equal to large order 2, medium order 2, and so on and so forth. If it's right, then this. If it's no sidebar, then this. And finally, we are just echoing out these classes, these foundation classes, and more classes depending on these conditions, depending on what user is selected, whether left, right, or no sidebar. And these classes will be applied to, if you check Cornova primary classes, let's have a look. In the index.php, in the div, So because of these classes being applied, the sidebar will be displayed accordingly. So I'll just show that to you one moment. Okay, so first is it's going to apply in the index.php that I've just explained to you. And second, to this sidebar, this one, okay, this actually is coming from the sidebar.php. And as we all know that this sidebar that is being displayed over here, this Cornova sidebar secondary classes function is being called. And inside of this function, that is a custom function which is defined under custom function.php under the includes folder, we are again checking the same thing. We are getting the value from the database, get the mod this value position. If it's left, then this will be the class that will be applied over here. Okay, and then we're going to echo out these classes. So based on these classes, because of these classes, the sidebar position will change from right to left or left to right or no sidebar, etc. Okay, so that's what is happening in this. Now the next one is the copyright text. So go to copyright text. Again, in the customizer setting. Okay, so we have add section, add setting, and add control, all of the same function. I'm not going to go into detail of it, just to show it to you that add control is going to add the control to the copyright section. And this time we have selected the type as text, hence you will see that this is a text option and not radio or checkbox. And then over here, add section is going to add these created controls into the copyright section. Okay, and then we'll override the footer copyright text here is where it's coming from here. Okay, and then this is going to add the settings to the database under Cornova copyright text, and I can show that to you. Cornova copyright text, which is over here. Okay, and then you're calling the sanitize text field function to sanitize the data. Okay, so that's that. And then finally, once that is all is done, if you go to theme customization API in the codex, it talks about that if you want to go ahead and get the live preview using JavaScript, then you need to add these additional functions, which is get setting, and set that to transport to post message, and that's what we're doing over here. All of these functions that are defined over here. Okay, and then finally all of these functions are going to be called inside of the custom function register of our class Cornova customizer, and this function will be called by this hook customize register, and that's how all of this is created. Okay, cool. And the next thing we need to do is we need to define these two hooks, which is customize preview init hook, which is going to call the live preview function, which is going to include the customizer live preview.js, which is this file. And inside of this file, I've already explained to you that this will be responsible for displaying the changes, live preview of the changes whenever you make changes over here. So if you select right, you can see that the sidebar position changes to right, or if you want to go ahead and write the copyright text over here. I'll just show that to you how this works. So this part that we have created, which is the copyright text, is responsible for making changes to the copyright section over here in the footer. So we'll go to footer.php, and then we had defined a function which I had commented out earlier. This is canis copyright text. This is a custom function which is defined under the, okay, it's not canis actually, this is Cornova. Okay, this function basically. So we'll go on to the custom functions.php, which is under includes folder, and we'll define this function Cornova copyright text, and we'll set the themes URI. We'll set the default using this printf function, which is going to replace this %1$s with the Cornova. Okay, and then this %2$s with the imranhsayed, which is the theme author. Okay, and the copyright text will be equal to get theme mod. So this is going to get the value from the database, okay, which will be normal copyright text. So in this case it's blank right now, okay, but since we had made changes earlier, this value should change. Okay, let's save it. I think we haven't saved it. Publish it, and let's change that to test. Okay, and now if we come to database, you can see that Cornova copyright text ID and the values changed to test. So it's going to check if there is a value in the database, then it's going to return the copyright text value, and if it isn't, then it's going to return the default value saying that it's Cornova by imranhsayed, which is the author. Okay. Now in the photo.php, this function is being called, which is why it's going to display the whatever changes are there. So we made changes to tests. Let's say tests, and you can see that that's what's been changed over here. Okay, cool. Now coming back to what we were discussing earlier, which was the customize the live preview.js. So whatever changes we're going to make over here, that live preview, you can see that it's there without the page refresh, which is happening because of this JavaScript live preview file. Okay, customize the live preview.js. Okay. Now next thing was customizer control enqueue scripts, and it's going to call the function load customizer control scripts, and this function is basically going to include the customizer control.js file, which is this file. Okay, right, so this is basically responsible for doing the setup. So what we learned in this entire video was how to go ahead and add controls to the existing panes inside of the customizer, how to add entirely new custom panes, and how to add different sections, how to add different controls to those sections using the add control, add section, and how to insert them into database using add setting function, and then use the customize register hook to go ahead and attach our custom functions into it and ensure that that shows on the back end. We also discussed how to display that on the front end using different functions. Okay, so I know this video had been really long, but it was important to sum up everything all in one go, otherwise it would have been so confusing. So now we have all of our customizer controls functioning perfectly fine. Okay, cool. I'll see you in the next video then. Take care. Bye.